Tonight, you are about to step into a forgotten world, long before civilization, where every night could be your last. Long before kingdoms, borders, and maps divided the earth, you belong to a much smaller world. Your world fits inside the memory of your people. It stretches from a familiar river to distant hills, covered in yellow grass. Beyond those hills lies uncertainty, and uncertainty has sharp teeth. The air smells of dry earth and smoke from the evening fire. Nearby, someone turns strips of meat above glowing embers, while children laugh softly beside their mothers. The crackling wood and distant calls of night birds blend into sounds that have comforted generations. Everything feels known, at least for now. You live among perhaps 30 people. Everyone knows everyone. Every face carries stories older than memory itself. Elders remember seasons when rain never came. Hunters remember rivers that changed their course. Children know which trees hide sweet fruits and which plants bring sickness. And this small circle feels like the entire universe. Historians generally agree that modern humans emerged in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago. Yet researchers continue debating exactly when groups began leaving their ancestral homelands. The journey was probably not one grand migration. It rarely works that way. Instead, families moved little by little. A valley today, another river tomorrow, a new horizon years later. You do not think of yourself as exploring. You are simply surviving. The morning begins with familiar routines. You wake beneath animal skins while cool air brushes your face. Smoke from the previous night's fire still carries the faint scent of charred wood. Somewhere nearby, an old woman hums softly while preparing roots gathered yesterday. These sounds mean safety, for now. Your people understand the stars above and the hills around you. They know where antelope travel. They know where water remains during dry months. They know which caves offer shelter when storms arrive. Knowledge means life, and ignorance means hunger. One curious detail fascinates anthropologists. Some researchers suspect ancient humans shared information through songs long before formal language became complex. Certain melodies may have acted as memory tools, helping people remember paths, seasons, and dangerous places. No one knows for certain. The evidence vanished long ago. Still, the possibility feels strangely beautiful. As daylight spreads across the grasslands, hunters prepare for another day. Spears rest against shoulders, polished smooth by years of use. Children follow behind, imitating adults with sticks and endless questions. Life continues, just as it always has. Or so it seems. Faraway seasons are changing. Rain patterns shift slowly across generations. Animals begin following unfamiliar routes. Rivers shrink where they once overflowed. Grasslands transform, almost without notice. Nature never announces these things. It whispers, and whispers take time. Scientists studying ancient climate patterns believe changes in rainfall may have influenced early migrations. Yet specialists still disagree about which environmental pressures mattered most. Perhaps drought drove some groups. Perhaps curiosity guided others. Maybe both. Human beings are complicated creatures. Even then, by evening, the smell of roasting meat fills the air once again. The tribe gathers around firelight while sparks dance upward into the darkness. Shadows move gently across familiar faces. Stories pass from elder to child, from mother to daughter, from father to son. Stories preserve worlds, and worlds preserve people. An old man points toward distant hills and speaks of places few have seen. Beyond those hills, he says rivers run wider. Herds gather in numbers beyond counting. Strange birds with colorful feathers fill forests where rain falls every day. Some listeners smile, others laugh. Perhaps the old man exaggerates. Old men often do. Still, his stories plant something dangerous inside young minds. Curiosity. Not everyone fears the unknown. One young hunter studies the horizon more often than before. A mother wonders whether better water lies elsewhere. Children ask questions no one can answer. What waits beyond those hills, nobody knows. And that mystery feels enormous. There are no maps, no roads, no promises, only possibilities. The wind carries scents from faraway places. Clouds drift toward unseen lands. Birds disappear and return according to rhythms no human fully understands. Nature itself seems restless, so perhaps people become restless too. One fascinating idea proposed by some scholars suggests that personality differences may have shaped migration. Maybe certain individuals were naturally more curious, more willing to risk uncertainty, more eager to leave comfort behind. It sounds surprisingly modern. Perhaps courage and stubbornness have always traveled together. Night arrives slowly. The stars emerge above endless darkness. You lie near the warmth of the fire, while insects hum softly beyond the circle of light. Smoke drifts upward into constellations your ancestors have watched for countless generations. Everything around you feels eternal. The same stars, the same stories, the same people. But change has already begun. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. Somewhere in the future, children yet unborn will speak different words. They will wear unfamiliar clothes. They will hunt different animals beneath different skies. Their descendants will become thousands of cultures, thousands of traditions, thousands of ways to understand life. Yet none of them know it, and neither do you. Tonight, you simply close your eyes beside people you love. The scent of smoke lingers in the air. Nearby, someone softly laughs at a joke already told 100 times. Beyond the firelight, the darkness stretches endlessly toward places no one has named. And somewhere inside that darkness waits the beginning of humanity's great separation. Not through war, not through conquest, but through footsteps, small footsteps, taken one day at a time. Section 2. Morning arrives with cool air and the soft scent of damp grass lingering beside the camp. You wake to familiar voices, the crackle of dying embers, and the gentle rustle of animal skins shifting nearby. Nothing appears different. Yet the world around you is much larger than your people understand. You know the river that bends around the hills. You know the grove where berries ripen. You know where antelope gather after rain. Beyond those places, however, the earth stretches farther than imagination itself, and nobody possesses a map. The horizon keeps its secrets. As sunlight touches the grasslands, hunters prepare for another journey. Spears rest against shoulders. Children chase one another around sleeping places, while mothers scrape hides with patient hands. Smoke from breakfast rises slowly into the pale sky. Life feels comfortably ordinary, but ordinary things rarely remain unchanged. Over generations, your people have followed animals across valleys and open plains. They move because seasons change, water disappears, herds migrate. A place that feeds families one year may betray them the next. Movement is natural. Staying forever is not. Modern archaeologists generally believe early human migrations happened gradually rather than through massive expeditions. Groups probably spread over thousands of years, moving short distances before settling again. Like ripples across water, slow and steady, one family leaves, then another. Children grow old. Grandchildren continue farther. Nobody realizes they are participating in history. They simply seek life. The sounds of the camp fade behind you as several hunters travel toward unfamiliar hills. Wind carries scents of wild herbs and distant rain. Grass brushes against your legs while insects buzz lazily among flowers. Everything feels peaceful until you climb higher. From the ridge above, the world suddenly expands. A broad valley unfolds beneath endless skies. Streams sparkle like silver threads. Trees cluster around hidden pools. Herds graze where no one from your group has hunted before. The sight steals your breath. Perhaps the old stories were true. Perhaps there are always more places. Historians still debate how much curiosity influenced ancient migrations. Environmental changes certainly mattered. Yet some researchers suspect human beings possessed an irresistible desire to explore. Maybe survival and wonder walked together. Nobody can say for sure. But the evidence suggests our ancestors rarely stood still. Back at camp, elders discuss familiar concerns. Water levels seem lower this season. Animals have become harder to predict. Certain fruits no longer appear where they once flourished. Nobody panics. Not yet. Nature changes slowly, and people adapt. One elderly woman remembers wetter years. She speaks softly, while smoke from the fire curls around her weathered face. Her hands smell faintly of herbs and earth. She recalls rivers overflowing and birds gathering in great numbers. Young listeners stare with curiosity. Could the world truly have been different? Memory itself becomes a map, not written on stone, written inside people. One unusual theory occasionally discussed among scholars suggests ancient groups may have inherited routes through generations of storytelling. A child listening beside the fire could eventually carry memories of places he had never personally visited. An invisible map, passed through voices. It sounds almost magical, yet perhaps memory always has been. As seasons continue passing, neighboring groups sometimes meet beside rivers or hunting grounds. Such encounters are unpredictable. Sometimes they exchange food and information. Sometimes they avoid one another completely. Everyone remains cautious. Strangers are mysteries, and mysteries can become dangers. Still, curiosity often wins. You notice differences. Another group shapes spear points differently. Their clothing uses unfamiliar animal skins. Their voices sound strange. Their laughter follows rhythms unlike your own. Yet their children laugh exactly the same. That realization feels oddly comforting. Though nobody speaks about culture, nobody even has such a word. There are only people, different people, and somehow familiar people. Scientists know that small populations separated over long periods eventually develop distinct languages and customs. Historians continue arguing about how quickly these changes occurred. Thousands of years may pass before differences become obvious. Time works patiently, very patiently. As evening arrives, clouds gather across the horizon. Rain brings the smell of wet soil and cool breezes across the camp. Families huddle near the fire, while drops tap softly against stretched hides overhead. The old storyteller speaks again. He describes lands beyond distant mountains. He talks about rivers that freeze, forests where giant animals roam, coastlines where endless water touches the sky. Some listeners smile politely. Others quietly wonder. Perhaps somewhere beyond these hills, another family sits beside another fire. Perhaps they tell stories about strange lands, too. And perhaps both stories are true. Nobody knows how large the earth truly is. Some may imagine it endless. Others believe spirits guard distant boundaries. Researchers remain uncertain about the beliefs of these ancient communities. Since stories vanished with time, much remains hidden. Their fears and hopes survive only through fragments left in bones, tools, and campsites. The silence of history hides many answers. Still, certain truths remain clear. Human beings moved, slowly, relentlessly, like water seeking new paths. And with each new valley, mountains began dividing communities. Rivers created boundaries. Deserts discouraged travel. Forests separated families who once shared songs around the same fire. Not immediately. Generations passed first. But distance is powerful. Distance changes everything. Long after tonight's fire grows cold, children not yet born will live beneath unfamiliar skies. They will inherit different stories. They will learn new words. They will shape tools in their own ways. And slowly, without anyone planning it, the world itself will become humanity's greatest sculptor. Mountains, rivers, grasslands, deserts, each landscape teaching different lessons. Each lesson creating different people, not different only an experience. As darkness settles across the camp, stars emerge one by one above the endless sky. Crickets sing beyond the warmth of the fire. Smoke carries the sweet smell of burning acacia wood, while tired voices fade into sleepy whispers. Tomorrow will seem ordinary. Another hunt, Another sunrise, another meal shared among familiar faces, yet the earth surrounding you grows larger every year, and somewhere beyond the horizon, unseen roads are already waiting. Section 3. By the time another generation rises beside these familiar fires, the world no longer feels quite the same. The wind smells different now. The rains arrive later, and animals that once followed reliable paths have become frustratingly unpredictable. You notice these changes the way people always do, slowly, almost reluctantly. Nothing happens all at once. That would be too easy. Nature prefers patience. Morning begins beneath pale skies, streaked with thin clouds. Cool air brushes your skin, while birds call from distant trees. Smoke from breakfast drifts upward, carrying the comforting scent of roasted roots and drying meat. Everything seems peaceful, but peace does not mean permanence. The old woman who remembers wetter seasons shakes her head while watching the horizon. She says the grass once grew higher. Streams once sang louder. Certain birds appeared every spring without fail. Now some do not return. Others arrive unexpectedly. Children listen politely. Young people often believe the world has always been exactly as they know it. That little habit never changes. Modern scientists studying ancient climate patterns believe shifts in temperature and rainfall influenced many early migrations. Periods of drought transformed landscapes, while colder climates altered animal movements across vast territories. Still, researchers continue debating the precise timing. The Earth guards its secrets carefully, and ancient weather leaves only whispers. As weeks pass, your people travel farther from familiar places. The sound of insects changes. Strange plants grow near new streams. Even the stars seem to rise from slightly different positions against the night sky. Not truly different, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things have a way of making people uneasy. One afternoon, while following grazing animals, you cross into a valley unlike any remembered by the elders. Tall trees provide deep shade. Moss covers rocks damp from hidden springs. The air smells rich and cool. Birdsong echoes everywhere. The place feels alive, almost sacred. Some among your people believe spirits live here. Others simply think it is beautiful. Perhaps both ideas are the same. Nobody knows. One curious theory, proposed by several anthropologists, suggests that different environments influenced how communities understood the world. Forest dwellers may have imagined life differently from people of open plains. Historians still argue about such connections. Beliefs leave few fossils, and thoughts vanish quickly. Yet landscapes shape emotions. That much seems undeniable. Around evening fires, conversations change. Hunters speak about strange animals found near the forests. Women gather unfamiliar fruits and experiment with roots never tasted before. Children invent games based on creatures they have recently discovered. Life adapts quietly, without permission, without announcements. One family begins sleeping beneath shelters, made from branches instead of rock overhangs. Another learns that certain tree bark repels insects. Elders teach these discoveries to younger generations. Knowledge grows, like roots spreading underground. Nobody realizes they are creating traditions. Traditions rarely announce themselves. They simply become habits, and habits become identities. Far to the north, other groups experience different lessons. Cold winds sweep across open plains. Mammoths roam distant landscapes. Snow visits more often than rain. Families learn to shape heavier clothing and stronger shelters. Meanwhile, near coastlines, communities discover shellfish and fish that fill empty stomachs. Rivers offer fresh water. Tides reveal hidden treasures. Different worlds, different teachers, different answers. Scholars generally agree that adaptation played a major role in human diversity. Yet experts remain uncertain about how quickly these cultural distinctions emerged. Thousands upon thousands of years blur the details. Time softens everything, even history. One rather unusual idea fascinates some researchers. They suggest that ancient groups may have developed distinct rhythms in songs, depending on the sounds surrounding them. Forest echoes differ from open grasslands. Ocean waves inspire different patterns than mountain winds. Nobody can prove this. Still, the thought feels strangely comforting. Perhaps nature itself taught music. Night arrives with gentle rain. Drops tap against leaves overhead, while smoke curls lazily into darkness. The fire crackles softly. Someone laughs after dropping a piece of roasted meat. Children yawn beside their mothers. Small moments matter. They always have. An elder tells stories of the ancestors. He speaks of endless plains where lions once hunted. He describes rivers larger than imagination and skies crowded with birds. Young listeners stare wide-eyed. The stories feel ancient, almost unbelievable, but memory keeps them alive. Historians continue debating how accurately oral traditions preserved information. Some scholars believe stories carried fragments of real events across countless generations. Others suspect myths transformed memories into something entirely new. Perhaps truth and imagination danced together. Humans have always enjoyed a good story, even Twifu. As years become decades, certain families remain in forests. Others continue wandering. Some return. Many do not. Distance grows quietly, and distance changes language. Different foods create different customs. New dangers inspire fresh solutions. Strange landscapes encourage unfamiliar beliefs. Without realizing it, humanity begins learning many versions of survival. None are wrong. None are superior. Each reflects the world surrounding them. A forest teaches patience. The plains reward movement. Mountains encourage caution. Coasts inspire curiosity. And every lesson leaves its mark. The scent of rain fades as stars emerge overhead. Frogs sing near hidden pools. Damp earth cools beneath your feet. Firelight dances across familiar faces, while the old storyteller slowly closes his eyes. Tomorrow brings another journey, another season, another change. Nobody senses how enormous those changes will become. Far in the future, people living beneath snow-covered mountains, tropical forests, deserts, and islands will speak thousands of languages and follow countless traditions. Yet all of them will inherit something from these quiet evenings: adaptation, memory, and the remarkable ability to belong wherever life leads them. Because culture does not begin with kings or monuments. It begins much earlier, with weather, with landscapes, with simple choices, and with ordinary people learning how to call unfamiliar places home. Section 4. Many years pass. Children become parents. Parents become elders. Faces disappear from memory, while new voices rise around familiar fires. The world continues changing, even when nobody notices. And perhaps the most remarkable change of all happens quietly. It happens inside mouths, inside ears, inside ordinary conversations. At first, nobody realizes anything unusual is happening. Why would they? Words are like rivers. They rarely stay still. Morning sunlight spreads across the valley, while cool mist lingers above the grass. You wake to bird song and the earthy smell of damp soil. Nearby, someone laughs softly while grinding seeds against smooth stone. The sound feels familiar, comforting. But if your ancestors from centuries earlier could hear these voices, they might notice strange differences. Certain sounds have shifted. Certain expressions have changed. Some names no longer exist. Others have appeared without explanation. Modern linguists believe language changes constantly, even within isolated communities. Small differences in pronunciation slowly accumulate over generations. Over enough time, familiar speech becomes something entirely new. Nobody intends this. It simply happens. Historians still disagree about how early language became fully complex. Some researchers believe sophisticated communication emerged very gradually. Others suspect language developed surprisingly early among modern humans. The truth remains elusive. Words leave few bones behind, and sounds vanish into the wind. You spend the day gathering berries beside a stream with relatives. The air smells sweet with crushed leaves and flowering plants. Children run through tall grass, shouting names for animals and birds. But interestingly, neighboring groups use different names. Not dramatically different. Not yet, just enough to notice. One family says a certain bird's name one way. Another family says it differently. Neither believes they are wrong. Both simply speak as their parents taught them. And that is how languages begin separating, one sound at a time. Some anthropologists propose that songs played an important role in preserving speech. Rhythms may have helped people remember stories and instructions. Certain melodies could even have survived longer than individual words. Nobody can prove this completely, but it feels wonderfully human. After all, people still sing, thousands of years later. As evening approaches, strangers arrive near your camp. Their clothing looks unusual. Their tools resemble yours, yet not quite. They smile cautiously and speak words that sound familiar, though some meanings feel strange. You understand enough, mostly. Enough to exchange enough to laugh together, enough to share stories beneath the stars. But something has changed. You can hear it. Distance has begun shaping voices. One elder finds this amusing. He chuckles softly and jokes that strangers always talk funny. Old people enjoy saying such things. Apparently they always have. The scent of roasting meat fills the air, while smoke drifts upward into the darkening sky. Children from both groups play together without hesitation. They invent games using gestures more than words. Children adapt quickly. Adults complicate things. A curious idea suggested by some scholars proposes that gestures may have remained important long after spoken language became dominant. Hands expressions and body movements probably helped bridge communication gaps between groups. Perhaps conversation was never just about words. Perhaps it still isn't. As generations continue passing, communities become separated by forests, rivers, and mountains. People who once shared the same grandparents now rarely meet. Stories evolve differently. Sounds shift further. Meanings change. A word describing rain in one region becomes a word describing clouds elsewhere. Another word disappears entirely. Nobody mourns its passing. People seldom notice when language changes. They simply keep talking. Historians generally agree that many ancient language families eventually spread across enormous regions. Yet specialists still debate exactly how these linguistic branches emerged and interacted. The story remains incomplete. Fragments, scattered across time. Still evidence suggests something remarkable. Human diversity grew naturally, not through sudden divisions, but through countless conversations. Around tonight's fire elders tell stories inherited from their own grandparents. Their voices rise and fall with familiar rhythms. Smoke carries the smell of acacia wood, while insects hum softly beyond the circle of light. Stories matter, perhaps more than people realize, because stories carry memories, and memories shape identity. One strange tale tells of ancestors who lived where giant rivers flowed endlessly. Another describes lands where the earth itself froze during winter. Nobody knows whether these tales are completely true. Perhaps truth hides inside myths. It often does. Researchers continue arguing over how accurately oral traditions preserved ancient migrations. Some stories may contain astonishing fragments of real events. Others transformed history into symbols and legends. Maybe both are correct. Human beings have use mixed facts with imagination. It makes life more interesting. Night deepens. The stars shine brightly overhead, while cool wind brushes your skin. Somewhere beyond the camp, wolves call softly across distant hills. The fire crackles gently, sending sparks upward into darkness, and voices surround you. Different voices, unique voices, voices slowly becoming their own. Far away, countless other fires burn beneath the same stars. Around those fires, people speak differently too. Their sounds carry distinct rhythms. Their stories follow unfamiliar paths. Yet they laugh, they worry, they love their children, they fear the darkness. Just like you, one day, thousands of languages will fill the world, Entire cultures will rise around words and stories. Songs will become traditions. Traditions will become identities. And none of it begins with grand declarations. It begins here. With ordinary conversations, with jokes shared around fires, with grandparents repeating stories, with children inventing new expressions, and with time, endless patient time, because humanity never truly decided to become many peoples. It simply kept talking, and slowly, beautifully, the voices of the world began to sing in different ways. Section 5. Long after familiar words begin drifting apart, another teacher starts shaping humanity. Cold. Not the ordinary chill that greets the morning, not the cool breeze that dances across rivers after rain. Something far more demanding, something that transforms entire worlds. You wake beneath heavy animal skins, while icy wind whistles outside your shelter. The air smells faintly of smoke-wet fur and melting snow. Nearby embers glow softly beneath layers of ash, preserving precious warmth through the night. Everyone stays close to the fire. For good reason. Winter does not forgive carelessness. The world around you has changed. Grasslands that once stretched endlessly now disappear beneath frost. Rivers freeze along their edges. Trees stand bare against pale skies. Herds move constantly, and survival depends upon following them. Nothing remains easy. Yet people adapt. They always do. Modern researchers generally agree that repeated Ice Age cycles influenced human populations across Eurasia. Vast glaciers expanded and retreated over thousands of years, transforming landscapes and redirecting migration routes. Still, specialists continue debating exactly how severe some regional climates became. The ancient weather keeps many secrets, and snow covers tracks remarkably well. Morning begins with quiet sounds. Snow crunches beneath your feet. Wind sighs through sparse trees. Somewhere in the distance, reindeer call across the frozen plains. The smell of animal fat and smoke lingers around camp, while hunters prepare for the day. Your clothing feels heavier now. Layers matter. Life depends on layers. Animal hides cover your shoulders. Fur lines your boots. Bone needles crafted with incredible care hold everything together. Archaeologists have discovered evidence suggesting Ice Age people possessed surprisingly sophisticated sewing techniques, which feels wonderfully practical. Nobody wants freezing toes. One curious theory proposes that decorative patterns on clothing may have represented group identity long before written symbols existed. Tiny beads and carved ornaments discovered at ancient sites hint at something beyond simple survival. Perhaps beauty mattered too. Humans are fatoyaneni that way, even in harsh winters. Historians still debate the exact meanings behind such decorations. Some scholars see social status. Others suspect spiritual beliefs. Many questions remain unanswered. Ancient fashion keeps its mysteries, but one thing appears clear. People cared about appearance, even while chasing mammoths. As daylight spreads across endless white plains, hunters move carefully. Breath rises in soft clouds. Spears gleam beneath pale sunlight. The silence feels enormous, almost sacred. The frozen world creates different habits. Food must last longer. Shelters require stronger walls. Families gather more closely around fires. Stories become precious companions during long nights, and children grow up learning lessons unknown to people living in forests or warm valleys. Cold teaches patience. Cold teaches planning. Cold teaches cooperation. Without those qualities, winter wins. A fascinating discovery from archaeology reveals that Ice Age communities often returned to seasonal camps year after year. Familiar places became anchors in a changing world. Some groups may even have recognized territories connected to memory and tradition. Not ownership, something gentler, belonging. Around evening fires, elders tell stories while fat, rich broth simmers above glowing embers. The smell fills the shelter with warmth and comfort. Children listen while carefully repairing leather straps or carving simple toys from bone. Life continues, despite everything. One old hunter speaks about southern lands where winters are milder. He remembers seeing forests rich with birds and streams flowing freely. Younger listeners stare with wonder. Those places sound impossible, almost magical. Yet somewhere far away, such places exist, and people there live differently. Communities farther south gather fruits longer into the year. Their clothing remains lighter. Rivers stay open. Fish become important sources of food. Their songs and stories revolve around things unfamiliar to northern hunters. Different environments, different rhythms, different traditions. Scholars generally agree that Ice Age conditions encouraged remarkable creativity. New tools appeared. Hunting strategies evolved. Shelters improved. Yet researchers still argue about how much contact existed between distant groups. Some believe trade networks stretched surprisingly far. Others remain cautious. The evidence whispers rather than shouts. One particularly unusual idea suggests that cave paintings may have helped preserve shared memories across generations. Images of animals and symbols could have served purposes beyond decoration. Perhaps they taught stories. Perhaps they marked spiritual beliefs. Perhaps they meant something entirely different. Nobody knows. And maybe mystery makes them more beautiful. Night arrives early. Darkness settles over the frozen world, while stars glitter like scattered ice above endless skies. Wind rattles hides covering the shelter. Firelight flickers across familiar faces. Outside, wolves howl somewhere beyond sight. The sound feels distant, not frightening, almost comforting. Because you understand this world. You know how to survive here, and survival creates identity. Children born beneath northern skies think differently from children raised in tropical forests. Their games differ. Their fears differ. Their memories differ. Not because one way is better, simply because snow teaches different lessons than rain. One day, people living in deserts, islands, jungles, mountains, and frozen plains will each develop customs shaped by their surroundings, and all of them will believe their world feels normal, which is perhaps the strangest thing of all. Normal changes, but people rarely notice. Tonight, you lie beside the warmth of the fire, while snowflakes drift quietly outside. Smoke carries the familiar scent of burning wood and cooked meat. Someone softly hums an old melody, while children sleep beneath blankets of fur. The winter wind continues its endless song, and somewhere beyond the horizon beneath forests untouched by frost, other families gather around other fires, living different lives, learning different lessons, beginning different traditions, yet sharing the same ancient dream to survive another season and wake beneath another sunrise. Section 6. Not every family follows the reindeer. Not every child grows up beneath endless snow, far away from the frozen plains. Another world stretches beneath a thick green roof of leaves and shadows. And this world teaches entirely different lessons. Morning arrives slowly here. Sunlight filters through branches in thin golden beams. Moist air clings gently to your skin. The smell of wet earth moss and flowering plants surrounds everything. Water drips softly from leaves, while unseen birds call from somewhere high above. Nothing feels empty. Everything feels alive. The forest breathes around you. Unlike the open grasslands where distant horizons offer warnings, dense forests hide their secrets. Animals move silently between trees. Rivers twist unexpectedly. Familiar landmarks disappear behind walls of green. You learn quickly. The forest rewards patience and punishes carelessness. Modern archaeologists generally agree that many early communities adapted to woodland environments long before farming appeared. Forests provided fruits, roots, nuts, fish, birds, and countless smaller animals. Life could be abundant if you understood where to look. Researchers still debate how large some ancient forest populations became. Thick vegetation often preserves fewer traces than dry landscapes, leaving many questions unanswered. The trees keep their stories well hidden, and trees are You wake each morning to different sounds than your distant cousins in the north. Instead of icy winds, you hear insects humming. Instead of reindeer calls, monkeys chatter somewhere above. Rain arrives without warning, bringing the scent of fresh leaves and rich soil. The air itself feels heavier, warm and gentle. Children grow up learning which berries nourish and which berries punish foolish curiosity. Elders teach where medicinal plants hide. Hunters understand the habits of animals rarely seen in open country. Knowledge becomes invisible, not written on stone, written inside memory. One curious theory proposed by several anthropologists suggests that heavily forested regions encouraged more intimate social networks. Small groups depended upon deep local knowledge rather than long-distance movement. Historians continue arguing about this possibility. Human behavior rarely follows simple rules. Still, forests encourage closeness, and closeness creates traditions. As evening approaches, rain begins tapping softly upon broad leaves overhead. Smoke rises from sheltered fires, while families gather beneath wooden structures woven from branches and hides. The smell of roasted fish mixes with sweet fruit drying near the flames. Comfort takes many forms. This is yours. An elderly woman teaches children how to weave fibers from plants. Her fingers move slowly, patiently, with the confidence of someone repeating lessons learned from grandparents long gone. Children imitate her carefully, not perfectly. Nobody starts perfect. That would be suspicious. Archaeologists have discovered evidence suggesting woven baskets and plant fibers may have played important roles in prehistoric life. Sadly, such materials rarely survive thousands of years. Time eats baskets, stone survives, which is rather unfair. Historians still disagree about how advanced these early technologies became. Much knowledge vanished long ago, leaving only fragments and educated guesses. Sometimes history resembles listening through a wall. You hear pieces, never the whole conversation. In the forests, rivers become companions. They provide fish, fresh water, and familiar routes through landscapes impossible to navigate otherwise. Canoes fashioned from logs or simple rafts may have carried people farther than scholars once imagined. Some researchers believe waterways connected communities, separated by dense wilderness. Others remain cautious. The evidence remains incomplete. But rivers have always loved introducing people to one another. Night settles gently. Frogs sing beside hidden streams. Crickets fill the darkness with endless music. The scent of damp wood and smoke hangs pleasantly in the air, while children drift toward sleep. Outside, the firelight unseen eyes watch. Not enemies, just neighbors. Birds resting overhead. Small animals searching for food. Life surrounding life. One strange idea occasionally discussed among scholars suggests that certain myths about spirits and unseen beings may have emerged naturally in forests. Strange sounds, shifting shadows, and hidden movements encourage imagination. Historians still debate such connections. Beliefs leave delicate footprints, and delicate footprints disappear quickly. Still, you understand something simple. The forest feels mysterious. It always will. People raised here learn different rhythms than those living beneath snowy skies or endless plains. They move more quietly. They notice scents. They recognize birds by sound alone. Their stories speak of rivers, trees, and creatures hidden beneath leaves. Different worlds create different memories, and memories shape culture far away. Northern hunters prepare for another harsh winter. On distant grasslands, wandering families follow great herds. Near coastlines, other communities study tides and gather shellfish. None of you realize how much your lives have begun diverging. Not through conflict, not through choice, through experience. Simple experience. Generations pass. Songs evolve. Beliefs shift. Tools change. Children become elders. And slowly each community grows into something beautifully unique. Yet beneath all these differences, familiar things remain. Parents worry about children. Grandparents repeat old stories. People laugh at bad jokes. And everybody complains when rain arrives at inconvenient moments. Some habits never disappear. Tonight, warm rain falls softly beyond the shelter. The fire crackles quietly, while sweet fruit dries above the smoke. Someone hums an old melody, whose meaning was ancient even before your grandparents were born. Outside, hidden rivers continue their endless journey through the darkness. And somewhere beyond those forests beneath skies, you have never seen other families gather around their own fires, learning different lessons, creating different traditions, and unknowingly weaving the countless cultures that will one day cover the earth. Section 7. Beyond the forests and frozen valleys, another kind of world stretches endlessly beneath the sky. A world without walls, a world without hiding places, a world that seems to go on forever. The grasslands breathe differently. Morning arrives with cool wind sweeping across open plains. Tall grasses ripple like waves beneath the rising sun. The smell of dry earth and wild sage drifts through the air, while distant hoofbeats echo somewhere beyond sight. You can see for miles. And that changes everything. There are no dense trees to conceal danger, no mountains to block your view. The sky itself becomes your companion. Modern archaeologists generally agree that vast grasslands supported some of the largest concentrations of grazing animals in prehistoric times. Herds moved across enormous distances, and human communities often followed them. Movement becomes life. Stillness becomes risk. Researchers continue debating how regularly early groups traveled. Some may have moved seasonally. Others perhaps wandered continuously, adjusting to changing conditions. The evidence offers clues, not certainty. Time rarely gives certainty. You wake before sunrise and immediately study the horizon. Clouds matter. Wind matters. Animal tracks matter. Every sign carries information. Survival depends upon paying attention. The plains reward awareness and punish distractions. Children learn this early. They recognize hoof prints before they recognize some plants. Young hunters practice throwing spears beneath endless skies, while elders teach them how to read weather hidden inside clouds. Knowledge lives everywhere, if you know where to look. One curious theory proposed by several anthropologists suggests that open landscapes encouraged stronger traditions of mobility and cooperation. Groups may have relied heavily upon sharing information over wide areas. Historians continue discussing the idea. Human societies are wonderfully complicated, but the plains encourage connection. Distance means little when everyone follows the same herds. As the day unfolds, you travel beside familiar companions. Wind brushes against your face, while insects hum among flowers scattered across the grasslands. The scent of animals lingers on the breeze. Suddenly the earth begins vibrating, not violently, rhythmically. Then they appear. Hundreds of grazing animals stretch across the horizon. Perhaps horses, perhaps bison, perhaps antelope. Their movement creates a low rumbling sound beneath the endless sky. Dust rises into sunlight, while birds circle overhead. The sight never grows ordinary, even after generations. One unusual discovery fascinates scholars. Ancient hunters often coordinated with remarkable sophistication. Some communities built structures, traps, or pathways designed to guide animals toward waiting hunters, which requires planning and trust. Nobody enjoys standing in front of angry bison without trust. Historians still debate exactly how these hunts were organized. Some researchers imagined strict leadership. Others believe cooperation emerged more naturally among equals. The answers remain hidden. Ancient conversations disappeared long ago. By afternoon, the camp begins moving again. Shelters are dismantled. Bundles are tied carefully. Children laugh while helping carry smaller items. Dogs, perhaps descendants of ancient wolves, follow nearby with curious eyes. Nothing remains permanent, not even home. Home travels with people. A fascinating possibility suggested by some researchers is that mobile communities may have exchanged ideas across surprisingly large regions. Objects discovered hundreds of miles from their origins hint at connections stretching farther than once imagined. Perhaps stories traveled too. Stories enjoy wandering, almost as much as humans do. Evening arrives beneath skies painted with orange light. Fires appear one by one across the camp. The smell of roasted meat and smoke drifts into the cool air. Somewhere nearby, laughter erupts after an old hunter exaggerates his accomplishments. Old hunters do that. Apparently they always have. Children gather around grandparents while stars slowly emerge overhead. Songs pass from voice to voice. The rhythm feels familiar, yet slightly different from melodies sung by forest people or northern hunters. Without realizing it, music itself begins changing. Researchers continue debating how early traditions, such as dance and song, developed. Since melodies leave no fossils, scholars must rely upon clues hidden inside surviving cultures and ancient instruments. Music remains mysterious. Perhaps that is part of its magic. One elder points toward distant stars and explains how they guide seasonal journeys. Constellations become maps. Moon phases become calendars. Wind patterns become teachers. The sky speaks, and the plains listen. People born here understand movement differently. Waiting too long means missing the herds. Missing the herds means hunger. Hunger teaches harsh lessons. So communities become flexible, adaptable, restless, not because they dislike staying, because the world itself keeps moving. Far away, forest families gather fruits beneath dripping leaves. Northern hunters prepare for snow. Along coastlines, others study the tides. And here, beneath endless skies, your people learn to trust horizons. Different lands, different rhythms, different futures. Yet all of them emerge from the same ancestors. One species, many journeys. Night settles peacefully over the grasslands. Wind whispers through tall grasses, while sparks drift upward into countless stars. Horses snort softly nearby. Children sleep wrapped in warm hides, while elders quietly exchange stories they have repeated 1,000 times. The scent of smoke lingers. The earth cools beneath your feet. Tomorrow the camp will move again, not because anyone commands it, not because maps demand it, but because the herds will move, and people will follow, generation after generation, until their descendants speak different languages, wear different clothes, tell different stories, and remember different skies, all because life on the endless plains taught them that home was never a place. Home was the journey itself. Section 8. Long before anyone imagined kingdoms or harbors, another path quietly invited human beings forward. Not across mountains, not through forests, but beside the sea. At first, the endless water seems frightening. Too vast, too unpredictable, too alive. Yet something about the coast keeps calling. Morning begins with the gentle roar of waves rolling against smooth stones. Cool, salt air brushes your face. Seabirds cry overhead, while the smell of wet sand, seaweed, and drifting shells fills the breeze. Everything tastes slightly different here, even the wind. The horizon stretches endlessly where sky and water meet in soft shades of blue. Unlike the grasslands, the coastline changes every day. Tides rise, tides retreat. Storms reshape familiar beaches. Nothing stands still, not even the shore. Modern archaeologists generally agree that coastal environments offered rich resources for early communities. Fish, shellfish, seabirds, and edible plants created reliable food sources that encouraged settlement. Though much evidence has vanished, ancient coastlines now lie beneath the sea. Researchers still debate how important these regions were to human migration. Rising oceans erased countless campsites, leaving historians with frustratingly incomplete stories. The sea hides its memories well, perhaps better than mountains. You wake before sunrise and walk toward the water with family members. Wet sand feels cool beneath your feet. Tiny crabs disappear into holes. Waves leave behind shells, seaweed, and small fish trapped in shallow pools. Children love low tide. Adults appreciate it too, though they pretend otherwise. People here learn different lessons from their cousins inland. They study the moon because it controls the tides. They observe birds because birds reveal schools of fish. They learn which seasons bring calm waters and which bring dangerous storms. The ocean becomes a teacher, and teachers deserve respect. One curious theory proposed by several anthropologists suggests that coastlines may have served as natural highways for migrating humans. Following shorelines requires fewer landmarks than crossing unfamiliar mountains or deserts. Historians continue debating this possibility. Ancient journeys leave faint traces, but the idea remains compelling. After all, water always knows where to go. As generations pass, people become increasingly comfortable beside the sea. They fashion hooks from bone, nets from plant fibers. Simple rafts perhaps appear, though researchers remain uncertain about exactly when such technologies emerged. Scholars still argue passionately over these details. Historians enjoy arguing. It keeps them warm. One remarkable discovery from archaeological sites reveals that some Chua early communities consumed shellfish regularly. Piles of discarded shells, called middens, survived for thousands of years, preserving glimpses into everyday life. Ancient trash becomes history, which feels strangely poetic. By afternoon, the smell of drying fish fills the camp. Smoke rises from small fires, while families repair tools and weave fibers. Children chase seabirds and laugh whenever waves surprise them. Laughter travels easily beside the sea, perhaps because waves never stop applauding. One elderly fisherman speaks of islands visible on clear days. He insists strange people live there. They wear unusual ornaments and sing unfamiliar songs. Some listeners believe him. Others suspect old age. Old age receives blame for many things, sometimes unfairly. Yet distant islands do exist, and people live there. Researchers still debate how early humans crossed stretches of water. Some evidence suggests surprisingly ancient sea voyages. Exactly how these journeys happened remains uncertain. Perhaps courage helped. Perhaps necessity. Probably both. Night approaches slowly. The sky turns gold, then crimson. Cool mist rises from the sea while gulls settle into silence. The smell of salt and smoke mixes pleasantly in the evening air. Families gather around the fire, and stories begin. One tale speaks of spirits living beneath the waves. Another describes giant creatures that guide lost travelers. Children listen wide-eyed, while elders smile quietly. Nobody knows where stories begin. Perhaps they grow naturally, like shells upon rocks. A fascinating idea proposed by some scholars suggests that coastal people developed stronger traditions connected to cycles and timing. The tides themselves encourage careful observation and patience. Historians continue exploring these possibilities. Beliefs rarely leave footprints, and tides erase footprints quickly. People raised beside the sea become different, not because they choose to, because the sea teaches differently. They trust currents. They understand seasons through birds and fish. They grow accustomed to horizons that promise unknown places. Their songs carry rhythms borrowed from waves. Their myths speak of creatures beneath the water. Their children dream beyond familiar shores. Meanwhile, inland communities tell stories about forests, snow, and endless grasslands. Different teachers, different dreams. Yet beneath those differences remains something wonderfully familiar. Parents still worry. Children still ask impossible questions. Grandparents still exaggerate. And everyone still hopes tomorrow brings enough food. Night settles completely. Moonlight dances upon dark water, while waves whisper endlessly against the shore. Firelight flickers across sleeping faces. The scent of salt lingers gently in the air. You close your eyes beside people you love. Above you, stars fill the sky. Beside you, the sea continues breathing. And somewhere beyond that dark horizon, unseen families sit beside their own fires, learning other lessons, singing other songs, preparing without knowing it to carry humanity toward distant islands and forgotten worlds. Because some people learned to trust rivers, some trusted forests, and some quietly and patiently learned to trust the sea. Section 9. Eventually, the sea stops feeling like a boundary and begins feeling like a road. Not an easy road. Certainly not a sensible road according to many nervous grandparents, but a road nonetheless. Far from the mainland, scattered islands rise from the water like green jewels. Some are covered with dense forests. Others are crowned with rocky cliffs and quiet beaches where seabirds nest undisturbed. From a distance they seem lonely, yet loneliness often creates remarkable things. Morning arrives with the sound of waves tapping gently against the shore. Humid air carries the scent of salt flowers and damp wood. Palm leaves rustle softly above your shelter, while bright birds greet the dawn with strange melodies. Life here feels different, smaller somehow, and larger at the same time. The ocean surrounds everything. Modern archaeologists generally agree that humans reached islands surprisingly early in many regions of the world. Communities eventually spread across places that required courage, skill, and perhaps a touch of stubborn optimism. Researchers still debate exactly how some voyages occurred. Ancient boats rarely survive, and the sea is not known for preserving paperwork. You wake beside a beach scattered with shells, polished smooth by countless tides. The sand feels warm beneath your feet. Fish traps built by your family wait patiently in shallow waters. Nearby, children gather colorful shells, while elders prepare woven baskets. Nothing feels rushed. Island life follows different rhythms. The sea decides much. Storms matter, winds matter, seasons matter. People learn quickly that nature enjoys making plans of its own. One curious theory proposed by anthropologists suggests that isolated island communities sometimes developed traditions, unlike those found anywhere else. Separation encouraged creativity, adaptation, and unique ways of understanding the world. Historians continue debating how isolated such communities truly became. The sea separates, but it also connects, which feels delightfully complicated. Food comes from many places. Fish fill woven nets. Birds nest in cliffs. Fruit grows abundantly during warm seasons. Families understand which reefs offer safety and which currents should never be trusted. Knowledge becomes precious. Mistakes become memorable, usually very memorable. One remarkable discovery fascinates researchers. Archaeological evidence from island societies often reveals astonishing skills in navigation and resource management. Communities adapted brilliantly to environments that initially appeared limited. Necessity inspires cleverness. It always has. Historians still argue over how ancient navigators found distant islands. Some suggest they followed stars. Others emphasize bird migrations, currents, and cloud formations. Perhaps they used all of them. Human beings rarely rely upon one trick, especially when floating above endless water. As afternoon sunlight dances across the sea, families repair nets beneath shaded trees. Smoke rises from cooking fires, while children invent games with shells and driftwood. The smell of roasted fish blends with sweet fruit drying in the sun. Comfort feels familiar, even far from the mainland. One elderly storyteller speaks of ancestors who arrived long ago from distant lands. He points toward the horizon and says that beyond those waters lie islands with strange customs and unknown songs. Young listeners stare in wonder. The ocean no longer feels frightening. It feels inviting. Perhaps curiosity survives everywhere, even on tiny islands. A rather unusual idea proposed by several scholars suggests that myths about giant sea creatures may have originated from encounters with whales, large fish, or strange sounds beneath the waves. Researchers remain uncertain. Stories have wild imaginations, and whales probably appreciate the attention. Night approaches with spectacular colors. Orange skies melt into purple, while gentle waves reflect the first stars. Warm breezes carry the scent of flowers and salt. Crickets begin singing from hidden places among the trees. The island settles into darkness. Families gather around the fire. Stories travel through generations. Songs fill the night, and something fascinating begins happening. Without realizing it, your people start creating traditions found nowhere else on Earth. Certain dances belong only here. Certain songs belong only here. Certain stories belong only here. Distance shapes identity, not through force, through time. Children born on islands think differently from those raised on grasslands or frozen plains. Their dreams involve reefs and storms, rather than mammoths and endless herds. Their myths speak of waves. Their memories smell of salt. Their lives move with the tides. Meanwhile, far away, forest communities know nothing about coral reefs. Northern hunters cannot imagine tropical birds. Desert families have never heard the endless whisper of ocean waves. Different homes, different memories, different worlds. Yet every culture remains part of the same long journey. One species, countless experiences. Historians generally agree that human diversity grew through adaptation rather than separation by design. Still, scholars continue debating how ideas spread between isolated societies and how often distant peoples encountered one another. The answers remain incomplete. Time scattered many clues, but enough remains to reveal something beautiful. Isolation creates uniqueness, connection creates exchange, and humanity somehow manages both. Tonight, moonlight shimmers across calm waters. Firelight flickers gently against faces weathered by sea winds. Somewhere beyond the reef, waves break endlessly against ancient rocks. The air smells of smoke and salt. Children sleep peacefully. Grandparents whisper stories almost forgotten. And above the island, countless stars stretch across the heavens. The same stars shining above forests, above frozen valleys, above endless plains, different worlds beneath them, but one sky above all. Section 10. Long before temples and written prayers, before priests and sacred books, people already searched for meaning, not because life was easy, but because life was mysterious, and mysteries have a habit of asking questions. Morning begins with cool air drifting through the camp. Smoke from the night's fire still lingers faintly, carrying the comforting scent of ash and roasted meat. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs, while birds greet the first light with familiar songs. Another ordinary day begins, and yet nothing about existence feels ordinary. You watch the sun rise. You watch animals appear and disappear with the seasons. You watch storms arrive without warning. You watch loved ones grow old. And eventually you watch them disappear. Such things invite questions. Questions nobody can answer completely. Modern archaeologists generally agree that symbolic thinking appeared remarkably early in human history. Burials, ornaments, cave paintings, and ritual objects suggest that people sought meaning far beyond immediate survival. Researchers still debate exactly when spiritual beliefs emerged. Ideas leave fragile evidence, and faith rarely fossilizes, but something stirred inside people. Something curious, something deeply human. As evening approaches, the familiar sounds of camp begin to soften. The smell of smoke rises into darkening skies. Children settle near their parents. Elders gather close to the warmth, while sparks drift upward like tiny stars. And then the stories begin. Stories matter more than anyone realizes. One elder speaks of animals who taught humanity to hunt. Another describes ancestors who became stars after death. A grandmother explains that rivers possess memories, and mountains listen patiently to travelers. Nobody interrupts. Nobody asks for proof. Stories are gifts, not arguments. One curious theory proposed by anthropologists suggests that storytelling may have strengthened cooperation among communities. Shared myths gave people common identities and helped preserve values across generations. Historians continue debating the idea. Human beliefs are wonderfully complicated. Still, stories bring people together. Perhaps that alone matters. Different lands inspire different spirits. People living beside the sea imagine creatures beneath the waves. Forest communities speak of unseen beings hidden among trees. Grassland hunters tell stories about stars guiding the herds. Those beneath northern skies find meaning within snow and winter darkness. Different landscapes, different myths, different dreams. Yet certain themes appear everywhere. Birth, death, love, fear, hope. Some questions belong to everyone. Archaeologists have discovered burial sites where ancient people carefully arranged bodies with tools flowers, or red pigments. Such discoveries suggest rituals existed far earlier than once believed, though historians still argue over their meanings. Perhaps these practices honored loved ones. Perhaps they prepared spirits for another world. Perhaps something entirely different. The dead remain quiet, and historians dislike quiet answers. One rather unusual idea proposed by some scholars suggests that dreams influenced early spiritual traditions. Vivid dreams of deceased relatives may have encouraged beliefs about spirits and life beyond death. Nobody can confirm such theories, but dreams have always felt powerful, even strange dreams, especially strange dreams. As darkness deepens, you stare into the fire. Flames dance unpredictably, while smoke carries familiar scents into the night air. Nearby, someone softly hums an ancient melody whose origins nobody remembers. The sound feels comforting, almost timeless. A child asks why thunder exists. An old man smiles and begins another story, not because he possesses answers, because stories make uncertainty easier, and uncertainty has always accompanied humanity. One remarkable truth fascinates scholars. Communities separated by enormous distances often developed spiritual ideas independently. Though details differed, many cultures respected ancestors' animals and natural forces. Historians continue debating why. Perhaps similar fears create similar questions. Perhaps wonder itself connects people. Nobody knows for certain. And perhaps certainty is overrated. People enjoy mysteries, even sleepy people. Around different fires across the world, countless stories unfold. Island communities tell tales of the sea. Forest families speak of hidden spirits. Mountain people honor peaks reaching into clouds. Northern hunters imagine stars watching over frozen lands. And each community believes its stories feel natural, because stories belong to places, and places shape memories. Children listening tonight will someday become elders. They will repeat these same tales, adding details, forgetting others, improving parts that sound dull. Humans are though not always accurate ones. Generations pass, myths evolve, beliefs deepen, songs change, rituals emerge. Without realizing it, communities begin building identities around shared stories. And stories become culture, not tools, not clothing, not shelters. Stories, invisible things, carried inside minds, passed through voices, protected by memory. Historians generally agree that oral traditions preserved knowledge long before writing existed. Yet scholars continue debating how faithfully these traditions transmitted events across centuries. Truth and imagination often traveled together. They still do. Night settles fully. Crickets sing beyond the camp. Smoke rises gently toward stars, scattered across endless darkness. The fire crackles softly, while children slowly drift to sleep beside their mothers. The air smells of ash and earth. The world feels quiet. Above you, constellations shine with silent patience, and around countless fires scattered across mountains, forests, islands, deserts, and frozen plains. Other people tell other stories. Different names, different spirits, different songs, yet all seeking the same comfort, meaning. Because long before civilizations divided humanity into nations and religions, ordinary people sat beside ordinary fires and wondered. They simply wondered. Section 11. Long before banners, flags, and family names marked who you were, another quiet language began telling your story. Not spoken words, not songs, clothing, the things wrapped around your body, slowly became messages. Messages about the land you knew, messages about the people you loved, messages about where you belonged. Morning arrives with a cool breeze carrying the scent of smoke and damp grass. You stretch beneath animal skins while sunlight filters softly into the camp. Nearby, someone scrapes a hide with a stone tool, and the steady sound mixes with birdsong and distant laughter. The day begins peacefully, and work begins immediately. Because clothes do not make themselves, modern archaeologists generally agree that prehistoric humans developed increasingly sophisticated clothing long before agriculture appeared. Bone needles, Animal hides fibers and decorative ornaments reveal remarkable skill and creativity. Researchers continued debating exactly when tailored clothing became widespread. Fabric disappears easily. Time is not kind to cloth, which feels rather unfair. Stone tools survive for thousands of years. Meanwhile, ancient shirts simply vanish. You spend the morning helping prepare hides beside a stream. Cool water brushes your hands, while the smell of wet leather fills the air. An elderly woman carefully softens animal skins with practiced movements learned from countless seasons. Her hands move effortlessly. Experience has its own elegance. Children watch carefully. Someday they will inherit these skills, and with them traditions. One group nearby favors thick furs because cold winds dominate their homeland. Another uses lighter coverings made from plant fibers and softer skins. Along coastlines, shells become ornaments. Forest communities favor woven materials and feathers. Different lands, different wardrobes, different identities. Nobody says this is our culture. People simply dress as their parents dressed, and culture quietly grows. One curious theory proposed by several anthropologists suggests that decorative clothing may have served as a form of social communication. Colors, patterns, and ornaments could have identified families' alliances or important life events. Historians still argue over these possibilities. Fashion historians thankfully argue with remarkable enthusiasm. Perhaps they always have. A remarkable discovery from archaeological sites reveals tiny beads made from shell's bone and ivory, dating back tens of thousands of years. Some required tremendous effort to create, which raises fascinating questions. Why spend hours making beads when survival demands so much attention? Perhaps beauty matters. Perhaps belonging matters. Perhaps humans simply enjoy looking nice. Nobody really changes. Researchers remain uncertain about the exact meanings behind these ornaments. Some scholars suspect spiritual purposes. Others emphasize status or personal expression. The answers remain hidden, but the beads remain. And sometimes small things tell large stories. As afternoon sunlight warms the camp, children decorate themselves with feathers and colorful stones. They imitate adults laughing whenever their creations fall apart. Children adore pretending. Adults secretly do too. Though they pretend otherwise, far away northern hunters stitch thick fur garments using bone needles and animal sinew. Their clothing protects against cruel winters. Along tropical coastlines, lighter coverings provide comfort beneath humid skies. Island communities weave plant fibers and decorate themselves with shells gathered from the sea. Different climates teach different styles, and style slowly becomes tradition. One unusual idea proposed by certain scholars suggests that body painting may have preceded elaborate clothing in many communities. Pigments made from clay charcoal or ochre could have marked ceremonies or personal identities. Historians still debate how widespread these practices became. Skin leaves few records, and ancient paint washes away. Still traces remain. Enough to inspire wonder, evening arrives with the smell of roasting fish and burning wood drifting through the camp. Smoke rises into the cooling air, while elders sit near the fire, repairing old garments. Their fingers move slowly, patiently, almost lovingly. Clothing carries memories. A worn hide might remind someone of a successful hunt. A necklace may honor a lost parent. A feather could recall a special journey. Objects become stories. Stories become identity. Around the fire, an old hunter jokes that young people care too much about decorations. Several younger listeners laugh quietly and continue adding beads to their necklaces. Some things never change. Apparently, elders have complained about fashion forever. Historians generally agree that clothing represented much more than protection from weather. Materials, ornaments, and styles likely reflected cultural traditions passed through generations. Researchers continue debating how complex these identities became, but complexity seems wonderfully human. People enjoy belonging, and belonging leaves marks. Children raised beneath snowy skies wear things different from children born beside tropical waters. Forest communities favor certain colors and materials. Grassland travelers prefer practicality. Island families treasure shells and woven fibers. Different landscapes, different memories, different appearances, yet beneath every decoration beats the same human heart. People want warmth. People want beauty. People want connection. And sometimes they want others to recognize who they are, not because they dislike strangers, because identity feels comforting. Night deepens. The fire crackles softly while stars appear overhead. The scent of smoke mixes with leather and drying herbs. Somewhere nearby, a grandmother hums quietly while finishing a child's small garment. Tomorrow, the child will wear it proudly. Years later, that child will teach the same skills to another generation. And so traditions continue, thread by thread, bead by bead, memory by memory, until countless cultures across the earth wear their histories upon their bodies, without ever realizing that it all began with ordinary people trying to stay warm, and perhaps, just perhaps, hoping to look a little beautiful too. Section 12. Long before books and libraries, before ink and carved tablets, memory itself became humanity's greatest treasure, and memory needed help, because even the wisest elder eventually forgets. Names fade, faces disappear, seasons blur together, but songs remember, stories remember, and dances remember. Morning arrives with a gentle mist hanging over the valley. The air smells of damp earth and smoke from the night's fire. Birds call from nearby trees, while soft laughter rises from children chasing one another through the grass. Another ordinary day begins, yet invisible things are being protected, things more valuable than tools, knowledge. Modern anthropologists generally agree that oral traditions played a central role in preserving information long before writing appeared. Songs, stories, rituals, and performances allowed communities to pass wisdom from generation to generation. Researchers still debate how accurate these traditions remained across centuries. Memory is faithful, but memory is creative, which makes historians slightly nervous and storytellers delightfully happy. You spend the morning helping gather roots beside a stream. Cool water flows around smooth stones, while dragonflies hover in the sunlight. Nearby, an elderly woman sings quietly as she works. Her voice rises and falls gently. The melody feels familiar. You've heard it since adulthood. Everyone has. But it is more than a song. Hidden inside the rhythm, which plants heal, which roots bring sickness, which seasons bring rain. Knowledge disguised as music. One fascinating theory proposed by several scholars suggests that repetition and rhythm helped ancient communities preserve enormous amounts of information. Songs may have functioned as living archives long before written language existed. Historians continue discussing this possibility, but songs certainly travel well, much better than paper. Paper hates rain. Children gather around elders in the afternoon. They watch carefully while old stories unfold. Hands move dramatically. Voices change. Laughter interrupts serious moments. Nobody simply listens. Everyone participates. Stories belong to communities, not individuals. One remarkable fact observed among many traditional societies is that storytelling often occurs during specific seasons or ceremonies. Certain stories are reserved for special occasions, protecting both memory and meaning. Researchers continue exploring these traditions. Culture has layers, and layers hide surprises. Faraway people living beside the sea teach children through chants connected to tides and stars. Grassland communities preserve hunting knowledge through dances and songs. Forest peoples remember medicinal plants through stories tied to animals and spirits. Different lessons, different rhythms, different memories, yet all serve the same purpose. Never forget. One curious idea proposed by some anthropologists suggests that dancing may have strengthened social bonds and helped synchronize communities emotionally. Shared movement created trust and reinforced identity. Historians still debate exactly how important such rituals became, but humans clearly enjoy dancing. Even embarrassing dancing, especially embarrassing dancing. As evening approaches, the smell of roasted meat fills the camp. Smoke curls upward, while families gather around the fire. Children settle close to grandparents knowing stories are about to begin. And stories always begin slowly. An old woman. Kutu clears her throat. Everyone smiles. They know what comes next. She tells of ancestors who followed great rivers long ago. She speaks of animals that taught patience and stars that guided travelers through darkness. Her voice rises and softens, like wind through trees. Nobody interrupts, not because they fear her, because these stories matter. Archaeologists generally agree that oral traditions may preserve fragments of ancient events. Some stories passed down through generations appear to contain echoes of changing coastlines, volcanic eruptions, or migrations. Researchers still argue over how much history survives inside myths, perhaps more than once believed, perhaps less. The truth dances somewhere in between. One unusual theory suggests that hand gestures and facial expressions played just as important a role as words themselves. Storytelling was never merely spoken. It was performed. Voices, movements, pauses, laughter, even silence. Perhaps silence tells stories too. Night settles softly. Crickets sing beyond the camp. Sparks drift upward into a sky crowded with stars. The air carries the familiar sense of smoke herbs and cooling earth. The old storyteller pauses. Children lean forward. She smiles, and everyone smiles with her, because they know the ending. They've heard it many times, and they love it anyway. Humans are wonderfully predictable that way. Generations pass. Songs change slightly. Stories gain details. Dances evolve. Some memories fade. Others survive. And slowly communities separated by mountains, forests, islands, and deserts develop traditions found nowhere else. A melody known only in one valley, a dance belonging to one people, a story told beneath one particular sky. Different cultures begin weaving themselves together, not with stone, not with walls, with memory. Invisible threads, strong threads, beautiful threads. People born thousands of years later will speak different languages and wear different clothes. Yet they will still gather around fires, stages, tables, and celebrations to share stories. Because memory needs voices, and voices need listeners. Tonight the fire burns low while children drift into sleep. Somewhere nearby, an elder quietly hums a melody older than anyone remembers. Perhaps the words have changed. Perhaps the tune has changed. But the purpose remains, to remember, to belong, and to ensure that tomorrow never forgets yesterday. Section 13. For thousands of years, distance has quietly shaped humanity. Mountains separate people. Forests hide them. Deserts discourage visitors. Oceans protect lonely islands. And because of these barriers, cultures grow like gardens in different corners of the world. But sooner or later, paths cross again, and strangers appear. Morning arrives with pale sunlight spilling across the valley. Cool air carries the scent of damp grass and yesterday's smoke. Somewhere nearby, birds chatter loudly, while children wake with sleepy voices and tangled hair. Everything feels familiar until something unexpected appears. Far beyond the camp, tiny figures move across the landscape. Not animals, not friends. People, your people, and not your people. Modern archaeologists generally agree that ancient communities regularly encountered neighboring groups. These meetings likely involved cooperation, exchange, competition, and curiosity, depending on circumstances and local traditions. Researchers still debate how frequent such encounters became. History preserves tools, not conversations, which is unfortunate. Conversations would be much more entertaining. At first, everyone grows quiet. Hunters grip their spears. Children stay close to mothers. Smoke rises gently into the morning sky while both groups study each other from a distance. Nobody rushes forward. Nobody runs away. Strangers deserve caution, but caution is not hatred. The visitors wear unfamiliar ornaments. Their hairstyles differ. Their tools are shaped in unusual ways. Some words sound recognizable, while others seem completely strange. Yet something feels familiar. Their children laugh. Their elders move carefully. Their people carry worries in their eyes, just like yours. One fascinating theory proposed by anthropologists suggests that encounters with neighboring groups encouraged innovation. New ideas, techniques, and customs spread more rapidly when communities interacted rather than remaining isolated. Historians continue debating the scale of these exchanges. Human beings enjoy sharing and borrowing, sometimes without giving credit. Apparently, that tradition is ancient. As the day unfolds, tension slowly softens. Food is offered. Gestures replace uncertain words. Smiles appear. Curiosity begins overcoming caution. Children lead the way. Children usually do. A young boy examines a shell necklace worn by one of the visitors. A girl laughs while comparing feathers braided into her hair with those worn by another child. Differences become interesting, not frightening. Researchers have discovered evidence suggesting that materials such as shells, stones, pigments, and decorative objects traveled remarkable distances in prehistoric times. Objects often appeared far from their original sources, which raises intriguing questions. Who carried them? How far did they travel? Who first thought, "You know what this camp needs"? More seashells. Nobody knows, but someone clearly did. By afternoon, hunters from both groups compare spear points. Women exchange knowledge about plants and food preparation. Elders tell stories using gestures and familiar sounds whenever words fail. Communication finds a way. It always does. One unusual idea proposed by several scholars suggests that humor may have played an important role in easing tensions between groups. Laughter creates trust and lowers fear. Historians cannot prove this. Sadly, jokes rarely fossilize, which feels deeply unfair. Ancient punchlines deserve better. As evening arrives, both groups share a fire. The scent of roasting meat fills the air, while sparks rise toward darkening skies. Crickets begin their endless music beyond the glow of the camp. Stories flow. Songs follow. Different voices blend together. Some melodies sound strange, others surprisingly familiar. People discover that certain animals appear in both traditions. Similar stars guide different travelers. Different names describe the same rivers and seasons. Perhaps strangers are not so strange. Perhaps everyone simply tells stories differently. Historians still debate how peaceful these encounters usually were. Some interactions undoubtedly brought conflict. Resources matter. Territory matters. Fear matters. But cooperation matters too. And cooperation leaves traces. Shared tools, shared ornaments, shared ideas. One remarkable truth becomes increasingly clear to scholars. Human history is not a story of isolated groups living forever apart. It is a story of meetings, unexpected meetings, important meetings, beautiful meetings, communities exchange pigments, techniques, songs, beliefs, even marriage partners. Generations later, children born from such connections carry pieces of many traditions. Cultures blend, then separate again, then blend once more, like rivers meeting and dividing across vast landscapes. Faraway island communities encounter visitors arriving over the horizon. Grassland travelers meet forest dwellers beside rivers. Northern hunters exchange knowledge with people from warmer regions. Different worlds touch, and touching changes everything. Night settles quietly. The stars appear one by one above the sleeping earth. Smoke drifts upward with the comforting smell of wood and herbs. Around the fire, strangers who no longer feel entirely strange sit beside one another. Someone laughs, someone sings, someone exaggerates a hunting story. Old habits survive. Even among new friends, children fall asleep without caring which camp people came from. Perhaps children understand something adults occasionally forget. Differences exist, but so does curiosity. And curiosity is powerful, because long before roads and cities connected, the world ordinary people met beside ordinary fires. They shared food. They exchanged stories. They borrowed ideas. And slowly, through countless encounters, spread across thousands of years, humanity learned something remarkable. You can remain yourself and still learn from strangers. Section 14. After strangers become familiar faces, something even more remarkable begins to happen. Ideas start traveling. Not armies, not empires. Ideas. And ideas are restless travelers. They cross rivers without swimming. They climb mountains without legs. They survive long after the people who first imagined them have disappeared. Morning arrives beneath a pale sky washed clean by overnight rain. The earth smells rich and fresh. Water droplets cling to leaves while birds sing loudly, as if celebrating another ordinary sunrise. The camp awakens slowly, but knowledge never truly sleeps. Modern archaeologists generally agree that prehistoric communities exchanged materials, technologies, and customs across surprisingly wide regions. Decorative stones, pigments, shells, and tools have been discovered far from their original sources. Researchers continue debating the scale of these networks. Ancient trade leaves faint footprints, and time enjoys erasing footprints. Still, enough remains to reveal something extraordinary. People have always shared, sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally. A visitor arrives carrying a spear, unlike anything your people have seen. The stone tip is shaped differently. The shaft balances more smoothly. Hunters gather around with curious eyes. Nobody says a word. Then everyone asks questions. Well, perhaps not everyone. Some old hunters insist their methods remain superior. Old hunters enjoy saying that. Every generation does. Yet curiosity wins. Soon others begin copying the design. Not exactly. People rarely copy perfectly. They adapt. And adaptation creates culture. One fascinating theory proposed by anthropologists suggests that social connections between groups acted like invisible roads. Through marriages, seasonal meetings, and wandering families, information spread gradually across enormous distances. Historians still argue over how efficient these networks became, but ideas seem remarkably difficult to imprison. They prefer wandering, almost like children. As afternoon sunlight warms the valley, women compare weaving techniques with visiting neighbors. New methods make baskets stronger. Different plants create better fibers. Someone discovers that mixing certain pigments produces brighter colors. Simple discoveries, tiny improvements. But tiny improvements accumulate. Researchers have uncovered evidence of pigments traveling hundreds of miles. Obsidian, from volcanic regions, appears far from its source. Shells from coastlines reach inland camps. Objects become messengers, silent messengers. One curious possibility proposed by scholars suggests that songs themselves may have traveled between communities. Melodies learned from visitors could slowly transform into entirely new traditions. Nobody can prove it. Songs vanish too easily. But music has always loved journeys, even sleepy songs. Evening approaches with the comforting scent of roasted meat and burning wood filling the air. Smoke rises gently, while children play games taught by visitors from another valley. The children no longer remember who invented the game, and they do not care. Fun belongs to everyone. Nearby elders exchange stories. One group describes storms near the coast. Another speaks of distant mountains where strange stones can be found. Hunters discuss animal migrations unknown to neighboring communities. Knowledge grows, not alone. Together, historians generally agree that many technological innovations spread through contact rather than independent invention. Yet scholars continue debating which discoveries emerged multiple times in different places. Perhaps some ideas appeared everywhere. Perhaps certain solutions simply made sense. Human beings often arrive at similar answers, especially when hungry. One unusual theory proposed by several researchers suggests that laughter and shared celebrations strengthen trust between communities, making exchanges easier. Sadly, archaeologists can't excavate ancient parties, Damas, which feels like a tremendous loss. Imagine the stories. Night falls softly. Stars appear overhead, while insects sing beyond the warmth of the fire. The air smells of smoke herbs and fresh rain. Sparks drift upward like tiny travelers heading toward the heavens. People sit together, different accents, different ornaments, different traditions. Yet tonight, everyone eats the same meal and listens to the same stories. One elder shares a tale learned from strangers many years ago. Over time, he changed details, added new characters, improved the ending. At least he believes he improved it. Storytellers are wonderfully confident. Children laugh anyway. Far away, similar exchanges unfold. Island communities borrow tools from visitors. Grassland hunters adopt unfamiliar spear designs. Forest families learn new ways to prepare plants. Northern groups share clothing techniques. Different cultures remain distinct, yet invisible threads connect them. Researchers still debate how much these exchanges shaped humanity's diversity. Some scholars emphasize isolation. Others highlight interaction. Perhaps both mattered. Isolation creates uniqueness. Connection spreads ideas. Together they weave history. Generations later, nobody remembers where certain customs originated. A necklace pattern once belonging to strangers becomes ordinary. A story from distant valleys feels ancient and familiar. People rarely notice when borrowed things become traditions. They simply become part of life. And perhaps that is the greatest magic of culture, not preserving everything exactly, but changing gracefully. Night deepens. The fire burns lower. Children sleep beneath warm hides. Somewhere nearby, an old woman hums a melody taught to her by a traveler she met decades ago. She barely remembers the traveler, but she remembers the song. And perhaps that is enough, because long before cities connected continents, ordinary people shared ordinary things: a tool, a story, a dance, a joke. And little by little, through countless quiet exchanges, humanity began weaving itself together, not into one culture, but into many cultures linked by invisible memories, each different, each beautiful, and each carrying pieces of strangers long forgotten. Section 15. For countless generations, people follow animals, seasons, rivers, and memories. The world itself decides where they go, but slowly, almost invisibly, something begins changing. Not in the sky, not in the mountains, inside human hands. Because one day, people stop asking where food might be and begin asking where food can grow. Morning arrives with soft fog drifting above a river valley. The earth smells rich after recent rain. Birds chatter among nearby trees, while smoke from breakfast fires rises peacefully into the cool air. Everything feels calm and surprisingly familiar. Yet beneath this ordinary morning, a revolution quietly begins. Modern archaeologists generally agree that agriculture emerged independently in several regions of the world, communities in places such as the Fertile Crescent. China, New Guinea, Africa, and the Americas developed farming in different ways. Researchers continue debating exactly why. No single answer satisfies everyone. History rarely offers simple explanations. Perhaps climate encouraged it. Perhaps growing populations demanded it. Perhaps curious people simply experimented. Humans are wonderfully stubborn that way. You notice something unusual. Certain plants always seem to grow near the camp. Seeds dropped months earlier have returned. Wild grasses flourish close to water. Familiar fruits appear where people once discarded scraps. Patterns reveal themselves, and people notice patterns, especially hungry people. One curious theory proposed by anthropologists suggests that women who often gathered plants may have recognized these patterns first and played essential roles in the earliest cultivation. Historians continue discussing this possibility. Ancient labor rarely receives enough credit, and history can be unfair. Still, the idea feels reasonable. People observe, people remember, people experiment. As seasons pass, families begin returning to the same fertile places. Children recognize landmarks. Elders remember which areas produce the best harvests. Temporary camps remain occupied longer. The rhythm changes, slowly, almost gently. One remarkable fact supported by archaeological evidence is that some communities continued hunting and gathering even after farming appeared. Agriculture did not instantly replace older traditions. People prefer caution, especially when survival is involved. Nobody abandons successful habits overnight. That would be suspicious. The smell of fresh grain drying near the fire becomes familiar. Stone tools used for grinding seeds appear more often. Storage pits hold precious food against difficult seasons. Life becomes less uncertain, though not easier, never easier. Historians still argue about whether agriculture improved human lives immediately. Some scholars emphasize increased food supplies and population growth. Others point toward harder labor and new challenges. Both may be true. Progress often brings complications, and complications love company. As afternoon sunlight warms the valley, children help gather seeds, while elders teach them which plants deserve protection. Families no longer wander constantly. Shelters become stronger. Memory becomes tied to places rather than journeys. Home changes, not completely, but enough. One unusual idea proposed by several researchers suggests that attachment to specific landscapes transformed spiritual beliefs. Ancestors became associated with villages, fields, and rivers rather than endless migration. Nobody knows exactly how these changes felt. The dead leave no diaries, but emotions leave traces, even invisible ones. Evening arrives with the comforting scent of roasting grain and cooking meat filling the camp. Smoke drifts upward while families gather around familiar fires. Nearby, children play games in places their grandparents once occupied. Generations begin sharing the same ground, and that changes people. Stories now speak about particular hills, particular streams, particular trees. Belonging deepens, not because movement disappears, but because roots begin appearing. Researchers generally agree that farming encouraged larger populations and more permanent settlements. Yet historians continue debating how quickly social differences and specialized roles developed. The process was gradual, like rivers carving stone. Patience shapes worlds. One fascinating discovery from archaeology reveals that different farming regions developed distinct crops and traditions. Wheat and barley flourished in some places. Rice thrived elsewhere. Maize transformed lives in distant lands. Different foods, different customs, different identities, and food matters deeply. People remember flavors, perhaps better than dates. Far away, some communities continue following herds. Others remain devoted to forests and coastlines. Humanity does not change together. It changes unevenly, like stars appearing one by one. Yet farming creates something new, villages. And villages create habits. Habits become traditions. Traditions become identities. One old hunter grumbles that young people spend too much time watching plants. He misses wandering with the seasons. Younger listeners smile politely and continue working in the fields. Every generation complains. Apparently agriculture did not solve that. Night settles softly over the valley. Crickets sing beside the river. The scent of earth smoke and grain lingers pleasantly in the air. Firelight dances across faces that return to the same place year after year. The stars above remain unchanged, but life below them slowly transforms. Children born here may never see distant mountains. Their stories belong to rivers and fields. Their songs celebrate harvests instead of migrations. Different memories, different dreams, different cultures, and somewhere far away, other communities discover farming in their own ways. Without kings, without commands, without knowing one another, humanity changes, not together, but beautifully. Because long before cities and civilizations, ordinary people simply noticed that seeds remembered where they fell. And once people learned that lesson, they too began remembering where they belonged. Section 16. The fields grow larger. The seasons become more important. And little by little, the wandering paths of your ancestors begin narrowing into familiar roads. Not stone roads. Not yet. Just footsteps repeated so often that they leave memories in the earth. Morning arrives with the smell of damp soil and wood smoke drifting through the village. Roosters call from nearby pens, while children run between houses carrying baskets and laughter. Sunlight paints the river in soft gold, and somewhere, An old woman sings while grinding grain. The sound has become ordinary, which is exactly the point, because ordinary things change history. Modern archaeologists generally agree that permanent settlements gradually grew larger after agriculture became established. Villages expanded populations, increased, and people began specializing in different tasks. Researchers still debate how quickly these changes unfolded. History dislikes schedules, and humans rarely hurry in the same direction. One family excels at pottery, another becomes known for weaving. Some people fish, others hunt, others spend their days tending crops beneath the hot sun. Nobody has a civilization. People simply solve problems, and problems have a remarkable talent for multiplying. One curious theory proposed by anthropologists suggests that specialization encouraged stronger cultural identities. Communities developed traditions around craft skills and social roles that distinguished them from neighboring groups. Historians continue discussing these ideas. People enjoy belonging, and belonging enjoys rituals. As the day unfolds, smoke rises from ovens, while the smell of fresh bread fills the air. Potters shape clay with patient hands. Fishermen repair nets near the riverbank. Children imitate adults with all the confidence of people who have absolutely no idea what they are doing, which, to be fair, describes many adults as well. One remarkable fact supported by archaeological discoveries is that pottery appeared independently in different parts of the world. Containers transformed daily life by making food storage easier and more reliable. Researchers still debate exactly why pottery spread unevenly. Clay survives. Motives do not. Ancient pots outlive ancient opinions, which feels slightly unfair. In the afternoon, travelers arrive from another settlement. Their clothing looks familiar, though their patterns differ. They bring unusual stones, dried fish, and stories from distant valleys. In exchange, your people offer grain and finely crafted baskets. Trade grows naturally. Nobody invents it. People simply notice that strangers possess interesting things, and humans are remarkably curious creatures. One unusual idea proposed by several scholars suggests that gossip traveled alongside goods. News about floods, marriages, illnesses, and distant customs may have spread across early trade networks. Historians can Sadly, gossip leaves no fossils, but it seems wonderfully believable. People have always enjoyed news, especially news about somebody else. As years become generations, villages become larger. Houses cluster closer together. Shared traditions deepen. Ceremonies become more elaborate. Memories become tied not only to families, but to entire communities. Identity expands. Not just my people, now. Village. One fascinating discovery from archaeology reveals that early settlements often contained communal spaces where people gathered for rituals, celebrations, or shared work. These places strengthened social bonds and collective identity. Researchers still debate how leadership emerged within such communities. Some emphasize cooperation, others point toward quality. Perhaps both appeared together. Human beings are complicated, always have been. The smell of cooking grain and roasting meat fills the evening air. Smoke rises from dozens of fires instead of only a few. Laughter echoes between houses, while dogs wander hopefully in search of dropped food. Dogs understand villages immediately, food and people, a simple philosophy. Children play games their grandparents once played. Songs are repeated season after season. Pottery patterns become recognizable. Wedding traditions emerge. Certain stories belong only to this place. Different villages, different customs, different personalities. Meanwhile, far away, other settlements grow beside other rivers. Rice fields spread across distant valleys. Maize flourishes elsewhere. Communities separated by mountains develop unique ways of life, different foods, different songs, different futures, yet the process remains strangely similar. People gather, people adapt, people belong. Historians generally agree that these settlements laid foundations for later civilizations. Yet researchers continue debating how much complexity existed before cities appeared. The boundaries remain blurry. History rarely draws straight lines. One curious theory proposes that festivals helped maintain unity within growing communities. Shared celebrations of puotos reinforced traditions and created emotional connections between people. Nobody knows exactly what those ancient festivals looked like, but humans love celebrations, even terrible dancing, especially terrible dancing. Night settles over the village. Crickets sing beside the river. The smell of bread smoke and fresh clay lingers gently in the air. Firelight flickers through doorways, while tired voices fade into sleepy whispers. You sit beside familiar faces, not wanderers tonight, neighbors. And perhaps that changes everything, because children born here inherit more than food and tools. They inherit belonging. They inherit traditions. They inherit stories tied to one place. And someday those stories will grow larger. Villages will become towns. Towns will become cities. Cultures will become civilizations. Yet beneath the walls and monuments of the future, something ancient remains. Ordinary people sharing meals, laughing with neighbors, arguing about small things, and quietly building worlds together. Section 17. As villages grow and generations multiply, something invisible begins spreading faster than rivers and roads. Words, not spoken words alone, entire families of languages, voices carried by travelers, marriages, migrations, and countless ordinary conversations. Nobody notices it happening. Nobody wakes up one morning and announces, "Today we shall create a new language." Life is never that organized. Morning arrives with soft sunlight warming the village walls. The smell of baking grain and damp earth drifts through the air, while birds chatter from nearby trees. Children run toward the river shouting to one another in voices that sound perfectly normal. And of course they do. Normal always feels normal. Modern linguists generally agree that many languages belong to larger families, connected through ancient ancestors. Indo-European, Sino-Tibetan, Niger-Congo, Austronesian, and other language groups spread across enormous distances over thousands of years. Researchers still debate exactly how some of these expansions occurred. Languages travel, but they leave surprisingly few footprints. You hear familiar voices around the village. Elders tell stories. Merchants bargain. Mothers call children home. Every word feels ancient and permanent. Yet none of them are. Words shift quietly. A pronunciation changes. A meaning evolves. A phrase disappears. Children invent expressions that annoy their grandparents. Apparently, this tradition is immortal. One fascinating theory proposed by several scholars suggests that growing populations and expanding trade networks accelerated language change. Communities meeting new neighbors borrowed sounds, ideas, and vocabulary. Historians continue discussing these possibilities. Languages dislike isolation. They enjoy company, and they absolutely love borrowing. As afternoon sunlight warms the market area, travelers from distant settlements arrive carrying pottery-woven cloth and unusual stories. Their speech sounds strange, yet familiar enough to understand with patience. Some words match, others confuse everyone. Communication becomes a delightful puzzle. One remarkable fact observed by linguists is that languages can preserve ancient relationships long after memories fade. People separated by thousands of miles may still share words inherited from ancestors they no longer remember, which feels almost magical. Ancient voices hiding inside modern conversations. Researchers still argue about where certain language families originated. Some scholars emphasize migration. Others highlight trade and cultural exchange. The answers remain wonderfully complicated. History enjoys complexity. It keeps researchers humble. Most days, one unusual idea proposed by anthropologists suggests that lullabies and children's songs may preserve older forms of language longer than ordinary speech. Nobody can prove this completely, But songs are stubborn things. They refuse to disappear politely. Evening approaches. The smell of cooked grain and roasted vegetables fills the air, while smoke rises above the rooftops. Merchants share meals with strangers. Children imitate accents and laugh at their own mistakes. Nobody speaks perfectly. Perfection would be exhausting and probably boring. As generations pass, languages continue multiplying. Villages separated by mountains develop distinct accents. Communities divided by rivers invent new expressions. Entire branches of speech slowly emerge. Nobody notices, because change happens one conversation at a time. Far away, remarkable journeys are unfolding across the Pacific. Austronesian-speaking peoples spread among islands carrying words, songs, and traditions with them. Across Eurasia, language families expand alongside farmers and travelers. In Africa, communities develop extraordinary linguistic diversity, shaped by ancient movements and local histories. Different sounds, different rhythms, different stories. Yet beneath them lie shared roots. Historians still debate how much ancient migrations influenced these language families. Some connections remain clear, others remain uncertain. Certain languages disappeared entirely before anyone recorded them. Silence swallowed countless voices, and silence rarely explains itself. One curious theory proposed by some scholars suggests that thousands of languages may have vanished without leaving traces. Entire worlds of stories, jokes, and memories disappeared with them, which feels deeply sad, because every language sees the world differently. Night settles softly over the village. Crickets sing beyond the houses, while the scent of smoke and fresh bread lingers pleasantly in the cool air. Stars emerge above the dark river, silent witnesses to countless conversations. Around the fire, grandparents repeat stories their own grandparents once heard. Children listen, though they occasionally giggle at old-fashioned words. Young people always do. Then many years later, they become the old people, and the cycle begins again. Researchers generally agree that language shaped identity as strongly as landscapes and traditions. Yet scholars continue debating whether language creates culture or culture creates language. Perhaps asking which came first misses the point. They grow together, like roots in trees. One cannot flourish without the other. Far beyond the horizon, thousands of communities speak in voices unique to their own histories. Some languages rise, others fade. Some spread across continents. Others remain hidden within valleys and islands. Each voice carries memories. Each word carries ancestors. Each accent carries home. And though humanity now speaks in countless ways, every language began with the same humble miracle. People sitting together, talking, laughing, teaching children, and giving names to the world around them. Section 18. As languages spread, and villages grow into thriving communities, paths that once belonged only to wandering animals begin carrying something entirely different. Ideas, goods, dreams, and strangers. The world is becoming connected again. Not completely, not quickly, but steadily. Morning arrives beneath a pale sky streaked with soft clouds. Cool air carries the smell of fresh bread, damp clay, and smoke from dozens of cooking fires. Merchants prepare baskets while fishermen return from the river with the night's catch. Life feels busy now, different from the old camps of wandering ancestors. Yet the same sun rises above them all. Modern historians generally agree that long-distance trade networks gradually connected distant societies long before great empires emerged. Obsidian shells, copper salt spices, and precious stones traveled across astonishing distances. Researchers still debate how organized these exchanges became. Ancient roads leave traces. Ancient conversations rarely do, which remains a disappointment. Stories deserve better preservation. You watch travelers arrive from lands your grandparents never visited. Their clothing looks unusual. Their accents sound unfamiliar. Their goods attract curious crowds. One man carries bright stones. Another brings fragrant herbs. A woman displays beautifully woven cloth, unlike anything produced locally. Strangers become expected. and expected strangers become neighbors. One fascinating theory, proposed by anthropologists, suggests that trade created cultural bridges stronger than political boundaries. Shared interests encouraged cooperation even among communities with very different beliefs. Historians continue discussing this possibility. People disagree about many things, but everyone appreciates useful tools and tasty food, especially tasty food. By afternoon, markets come alive with voices and laughter. Children chase one another between baskets of grain. The scent of spices mixes with smoke and river air. Musicians perform songs learned from travelers who themselves learned them elsewhere. Nobody remembers where the melodies originated, but everyone enjoys them. One remarkable archaeological fact reveals that objects from distant regions sometimes traveled hundreds or even thousands of miles. Seashells appeared inland. Copper crossed mountains. Rare stones passed through countless hands. Objects became travelers without needing feet. Researchers still argue over the exact routes these goods followed. Rivers, coastlines, and seasonal paths all played roles. Some connections were temporary. Others endured for generations. The map remains incomplete. History always leaves blank spaces. One unusual idea proposed by several scholars suggests that stories and myths spread alongside material goods. A tale heard in one valley might slowly transform while passing through dozens of cultures. Nobody can trace such journeys perfectly. Stories enjoy disguises, and they rarely travel alone. Evening arrives with the smell of roasted grain fish and herbs filling the air. Fires flicker across the settlement, while visitors and locals share meals beneath darkening skies. Languages mingle, laughter mingles, traditions mingle. Yet something remarkable happens. People remain themselves. The travelers do not become identical to their hosts. The hosts do not abandon their customs. Connection does not erase identity. It enriches it. Far away communities separated by deserts, mountains, and oceans experience similar exchanges. In Asia, river civilizations trade goods and ideas. In Africa, networks connect distant peoples. Across Europe and the Middle East, technologies and stories spread through countless encounters. Different cultures, shared pathways, different memories, shared curiosities. Historians generally agree that these exchanges transformed societies. Yet scholars continue debating which inventions spread through contact and which emerged independently. Perhaps humanity deserves credit for both. People are inventive and wonderfully curious. One curious theory suggests that hospitality traditions developed partly because strangers brought opportunities as well as dangers. Welcoming visitors carefully may have balanced caution with curiosity. Researchers continue exploring these ideas, but one truth feels timeless. Nobody learns much by speaking only to themselves. Night settles softly. Stars shine above rooftops and riverbanks. The scent of smoke and cooling earth drifts through the quiet air. Somewhere nearby, a musician plays a melody whose origins nobody remembers. Children fall asleep hearing stories from places they have never seen. Grandparents marvel at strange fruits and unfamiliar fabrics. Merchants dream about distant markets, and travelers prepare for tomorrow's journey. Because roads now connect more than villages. They connect memories. They connect traditions. They connect hopes. Yet despite these growing links, humanity does not become one single culture. Quite the opposite. New ideas inspire new identities. Different societies shape borrowed knowledge in unique ways, and diversity grows richer, like colors mixing without losing themselves. Perhaps that is the greatest surprise. Connection does not destroy differences, it reveals them. And somewhere beyond the horizon, new paths continue opening, new songs continue spreading, new stories continue changing, all because ordinary people welcomed strangers, traded useful things, and discovered that curiosity often travels farther than fear. Section 19. By now the world contains thousands of voices, thousands of songs, thousands of customs. Different foods fill different tables, different stories comfort different children, different skies shape the different dreams. And from a distance, It might seem impossible that all these cultures belong to the same species, yet they do, because beneath every difference, familiar things remain. Morning arrives over countless landscapes at once. In one place, snow crunches beneath heavy boots. In another, humid air carries the scent of rain and flowers. Elsewhere, desert winds move gently across endless sands. Along distant shores, waves greet another sunrise. Different mornings, same sun. Modern anthropologists generally agree that cultural diversity developed through thousands of years of adaptation, migration, and exchange. Human societies responded creatively to local environments and historical experiences. Researchers still debate the relative importance of different factors. History rarely offers neat explanations. Human beings are delightfully complicated, and complications make life interesting. You wake beside people who speak your language and follow your traditions. Their jokes make sense. Their songs feel familiar. Their food tastes like home. Everything seems normal. Of course it does. Normal always feels invisible. Yet somewhere far away, another family wakes to completely different customs. Their breakfast smells unfamiliar. Their songs follow strange rhythms. Their stories speak of creatures you have never imagined, and they feel exactly the same way. Their world feels normal too. One fascinating theory, proposed by several scholars, suggests that humans possess remarkable flexibility, allowing communities to thrive in environments ranging from tropical islands to frozen tundra. Historians continue discussing how this adaptability shaped civilization. But one thing appears clear. Human beings are astonishing travelers and even better survivors. Children everywhere laugh. Parents everywhere worry. Grandparents everywhere repeat stories. Teenagers everywhere believe older generations misunderstand everything. Some traditions transcend culture. Apparently complaining about young people is one of them. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of shared human behaviors, stretching back tens of thousands of years. Personal ornaments, burials, music, and symbolic art appear across many regions. Researchers still argue over why certain patterns emerged independently. Perhaps people simply ask similar questions. Perhaps wonder itself belongs to everyone. By afternoon, markets, villages, and settlements across the world come alive. Different languages fill the air. Different spices perfume cooking fires. Different tools reflect different histories. Yet trade continues. Friendships continue. Stories continue. Humanity remains connected. One unusual idea proposed by anthropologists suggests that humor itself may be universal, though expressed differently. Laughter strengthens social bonds, regardless of language or geography. Sadly, ancient jokes rarely survive, which is tragic. Imagine losing thousands of years of terrible puns. History can be cruel. As evening approaches, families gather beneath different skies. Some eat rice, some eat bread, some eat fish, some eat roots gathered from forests. Different meals, same purpose. People share food. People share stories. People share affection. Researchers generally agree that diversity strengthened humanity rather than weakening it. Different environments encouraged different solutions. Different traditions preserve different kinds of knowledge. Historians continue debating how much cultural exchange accelerated progress. But diversity itself became a resource, a treasure, not a problem. Far away, civilizations rise. Cities appear. Empires expand. Trade routes multiply. Languages flourish. Others disappear. The world becomes increasingly complex. Yet beneath the complexity lies something ancient, something familiar. Firelight, conversation, memory. One curious theory, proposed by some scholars, suggests that empathy and cooperation played equally important roles in human survival as intelligence and technology. Researchers continue exploring these ideas, but perhaps the evidence surrounds us. Because no culture survives alone forever. People learn from neighbors, borrow from strangers, adapt with time, and carry pieces of one another. Night settles gently across the earth. Stars shine above forests, mountains, rivers, islands, deserts, and cities. The scent of smoke rises from countless homes. Crickets sing in some places, waves whisper in others, and everywhere people prepare for sleep. Children curl beside parents. Old stories are told once more. Soft laughter fills the darkness. Different words, different melodies, different memories, yet the same hopes, safety, love, tomorrow. Perhaps that is humanity's greatest secret. Not that cultures became different. Difference was inevitable. The miracle is that beneath those differences, ordinary people remained wonderfully familiar, and perhaps they always will. Because no matter how many languages fill the world, every human heart still understands kindness, and every culture in its own beautiful way still calls someone home. Section 20. After countless generations, after endless journeys beneath unfamiliar skies, after forests and mountains, deserts and oceans, something remarkable becomes clear. Humanity never truly separated. It only changed. Like branches growing from the same ancient tree, morning arrives somewhere over the earth, perhaps above a frozen valley, perhaps beside a tropical shore, perhaps above fields watered by quiet rivers. The sun rises anyway, and people wake. Children stretch sleepily. Parents prepare food. Grandparents smile at memories nobody else remembers. The ordinary rituals continue. Modern genetics has revealed something astonishing. No matter how different cultures appear, all modern humans share remarkably recent common ancestors. Researchers generally agree that every population on Earth belongs to one interconnected human family. Historians still debate many details of ancient migrations. Scientists continue refining timelines and routes, but the larger truth remains. Humanity traveled together, even while traveling apart. You can almost imagine those distant ancestors, small groups beside fading campfires, people who never knew they were creating languages, people who never imagined cities, people who simply followed rivers and seasons. And somehow, through ordinary choices repeated over thousands of years, they created thousands of cultures, not by design, not through plans, through life itself. One fascinating theory proposed by anthropologists suggests that diversity became humanity's greatest strength. Different environments inspired different solutions. Different traditions preserved different knowledge. Historians continued discussing this idea, but diversity certainly helped people survive. Nature appreciates variety. Perhaps wisdom does too. The smell of smoke still comforts people. Stories still matter. Music still brings tears. Parents still worry. Children still ask impossible questions. Old people still insist things were better long ago. Apparently, that tradition survived everything. One remarkable truth continues fascinating scholars. Ancient DNA reveals that populations mixed repeatedly throughout history. Communities met separated, reunited, and exchanged both ideas and ancestors. Human history resembles rivers, not walls. Rivers divide, then join again. Researchers still argue over countless mysteries. Entire migrations remain uncertain. Lost languages vanished without records. Forgotten stories disappeared with their last storytellers. Some answers may never return, and perhaps that is acceptable. Mystery belongs to history too. One unusual thought, suggested by several scholars, proposes that if ancient ancestors could witness today's world, they might notice differences in clothing and speech, but they would recognize love. They would recognize grief. They would recognize laughter. And they would understand families gathering around food. Some things are eternal, even if everything else changes. Night slowly arrives. Stars appear one by one above the earth, just as they did thousands of generations ago. The scent of wood smoke drifts through the air. Somewhere, waves touch a quiet shore. Somewhere else, rain taps gently against leaves. And everywhere people seek comfort. Different songs, different prayers, different stories, the same longing, to belong, to remember, to love, to continue. Because beneath every culture lies another story. Not the story of separation, but the story of connection. The story of ordinary people walking toward unfamiliar horizons and carrying pieces of home with them. Slowly now allow the world to become quieter. Imagine those first families beneath ancient skies. The fire burns softly. The air smells of smoke and earth. Children sleep beneath warm hides, while elders speak in voices gentle with memory. The stars above remain unchanged. Rivers continue flowing. The wind moves through forests and across open plains. Waves whisper beside distant islands. Snow falls upon northern valleys. Rain nourishes tropical leaves. And everywhere life continues its patient rhythm. You no longer need to follow those ancient journeys. You have walked beside hunters and storytellers. You have crossed mountains and coastlines. You have listened to songs carried through countless generations. And now those fires grow smaller, their voices softer, their footsteps more distant. Somewhere an old grandmother hums a melody older than memory. Somewhere children laugh in their dreams. Somewhere a traveler watches stars above an unfamiliar road. And somewhere beyond history itself, those first ancestors rest beneath forgotten skies. Their names disappeared. Their languages vanished. Their faces were lost. Yet their greatest gift remains. A world filled with many cultures, many stories, many beautiful ways to be human. And beneath them all, one shared beginning. So let the stars drift overhead. Let the wind move gently across the grass. Let the sounds of distant rivers fade into the darkness. And rest, because tonight, just as thousands of generations before you did, you can simply close your eyes beneath the same ancient sky and sleep